Have you ever had the feeling that there's a part of the financial market that simply doesn't appear to you, no matter how much you study, invest, or follow all the right steps? This unsettling feeling, almost as if there were a conversation happening on the other side of the wall, is more common than it seems. And that's exactly what began to unsettle Sharkston. He was evolving, growing, accumulating wealth with discipline and consistency. But something inside him told him that there was another level, a layer that doesn't reveal itself to those still in the early stages of the game. A kind of invisible door that only opens when the investor is truly ready. Gradually, Sharkston began to notice subtle signs of this other side. People commenting on investments that never appear for beginners, opportunities that don't emerge in the most popular apps, mentorships that simply aren't offered to those still building their first steps towards wealth. And perhaps most intriguingly, conversations among more mature investors who seem to speak a completely different language. They mentioned long-term strategies, economic cycles, wealth protection, compound interest seen not as a miracle but as a tool of war. It was as if there was a set of information, access, and mindsets that only emerge when someone crosses that 250K threshold. And from there, everything changes perspective. Sharkston realized it wasn't just about money. It was about access regarding the type of investor he was becoming. This symbolic door represents the exact point where you stop being seen as someone just starting out and begin to be seen as someone who has already understood the game of wealth building. And this deeply affects those seeking financial stability, long-term freedom, and access to opportunities that truly drive an investor's life. Perhaps you've also felt this, as if there's a conversation happening that you haven't yet been invited to participate in. A table where they talk about large investments, private opportunities, silent investments that never appear to the general public. A table that seems distant, but is more accessible than many people imagine. The further Sharkston progressed, the clearer it became that these conversations weren't about making quick money. On the contrary, they were about consistency, about protecting before multiplying, about building a long-term mindset, the kind that separates those who merely invest from those who truly grow. He does. Himself comments, "I thought I was investing, until I realized there was another game happening behind the scenes." This phrase perfectly summarizes what many investors feel when they begin to perceive this new level. A mixture of curiosity, anxiety, and a gigantic desire to know what lies within. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever felt that you were close but not yet inside? This is where things start to get really interesting. Because what Sharkston discovers next isn't just unexpected, it's transformative. It's the kind of truth that nobody teaches in beginner videos, and that rarely comes up in everyday conversations. What you're about to discover might surprise you, and perhaps explain why many people spend years investing without ever reaching this level. Stick with me until the end, because what comes next might open your eyes in a way that will completely change how you see your financial journey. And from this point on, the door begins to reveal itself, little by little, detail by detail, until you finally see what's behind it. And as that door began to open, Sharkston realized it wasn't just a financial limit being surpassed, but a mental one, a silent transition between trying to invest and truly thinking like an investor. And perhaps, as you listen to this now, something inside you is also awakening. Perhaps you've already felt that same restlessness, that feeling that there's a next level waiting, observing, testing your consistency before opening up. It's curious how the market does this. It doesn't announce, it doesn't warn, it doesn't summon. It simply observes who remains steadfast. And if this topic resonates with you, if any part of Sharkston's journey connects with your own, take this moment and tell me in the comments. Share what touched you the most. What you've noticed about this other side that seems to exist even when no one talks about it. Reading what you feel, what you experience, what you suspect. This creates a real community. A community of people who don't just want to invest, they want to evolve together. And you have no idea how each comment helps strengthen this conversation and bring this content to more people who need to hear it too. If you feel this video has already opened a window for you, leave a like. It seems simple, but this small gesture pushes the video forward, makes the algorithm understand that this message matters, that this type of conversation needs to reach other investors who, like you, are trying to cross that invisible door. And if you're thinking, I want to keep following this, I want to understand more about this level of the financial game, then subscribe to the channel. That's what guarantees you'll be here with me for the next steps, the next insights, the next revelations that Sharkston will uncover as he progresses on this journey. Your participation isn't just important, it changes everything. It's what keeps this flame burning, what keeps the channel alive. What shows me that this message is reaching those who need it to reach. Together, we've built this space where talking about wealth, discipline, and mindset isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. And while you do this, while you leave your comment, your like, your subscription, the story continues, because Sharkston is about to take the next step within this room, and what he finds next makes it clear that that door wasn't the end, but only the beginning of something much bigger. When Sharkston's finally walked through that door, the immediate sensation was of stepping into another kind of reality, almost as if he had entered the backstage of the financial market itself. There was no noise, no confusion, none of that typical beginner's rush to get everything right at once. The environment was clean, organized, almost futuristic, with screens scattered around showing graphs that didn't move frenetically, but with a calmness that was almost unsettling. Most people there had a serene look, the kind that only appears in those who have already understood that building wealth isn't about rushing, it's about maintaining the right pace for years. And that's what intrigued Sharkston the most. Nobody seemed impressed by large numbers. It was as if talking about a $1.2 million net worth was as natural as commenting on the weather. He paused for a few seconds just to listen. The conversations were completely different from anything he had ever heard in forums and beginner groups. Nobody there talked about the hot stock of the moment, or the currency that's going to explode. They discussed 20% annual returns maintained for 10 years, analyzed private rounds with surgical calm, discussed 50K tickets as if they were common opportunities, and projected scenarios for the next decade with the same ease that many project the next month. It was a shock. A silent, profound shock that dismantled the illusion that investing was about finding shortcuts. There, in that room, it became clear that true investing is about conscious decisions, a broad vision, and a mindset built brick by brick over time. Every phrase Sharkston heard seemed to reveal a hidden truth about this universe. He realized that this group wasn't seeking brilliance. They were seeking consistency. They weren't seeking shortcuts. They were seeking clarity. And it wasn't just about technical knowledge. It was about inner transformation, about the journey that leads an average investor to think deeply, to see the impact of the choices they make today, choices that will only bear fruit many years from now. It was as if the entire room was in a different rhythm, in a different time, breathing a different kind of ambition, a mature, almost silent ambition. And observing all of that, Sharkston began to understand something he had never perceived so clearly. It wasn't the money that made those conversations happen. It was the level of awareness. It was the maturity that comes with learning to control impulses, to navigate difficult times without losing focus, to manage anxiety while one's assets grow one step at a time. This change in mindset is the true turning point, the key that allows the investor to see far ahead without getting lost in haste. Every detail of the room showed that the game there was different, completely unlike anything he had experienced until then. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's a point in this story that explains why so few people manage to access this level. It's something that doesn't show up in graphs, doesn't show up in apps, and is rarely discussed openly. But those who understand this start playing from a completely different position, with firmer decisions, a clearer vision, and a sense of direction that transforms everything that comes after. And it's precisely there that this journey begins to take on a different meaning for Sharkston, revealing nuances that change how he sees each step he's taken to get here. And each step he will still take. Comment below. I'm on this journey too. As Sharkston got closer to the conversations, the feeling was the same as someone who had always watched the game from the stands and suddenly had access to the sidelines. It wasn't just the content of the speeches. It was the tone, the posture, the almost disconcerting calm with which those investors approached topics that, to beginners, would seem daunting. They weren't after the next hype, the miraculous promise, or the chart that rises in a straight line. On the contrary, they spoke of patience as if speaking of air, of discipline as if speaking of something indispensable for survival, of decisions that need to mature before generating any real impact. It was like hearing the hidden truth of the market, a truth that no one publishes in short posts, that doesn't appear in quick videos, and that is rarely spoken aloud. Sharkston realized that, in that environment, risk analysis came before any projection. Protection came before any enthusiasm. They spoke of preserving what they had already built with an almost sacred respect, as if they understood that every penny there had a story, an effort, a conscious choice behind it. No impulses, no, "I'll try my luck." They treated wealth as a complex construction, not as a gamble. This difference in mentality was so clear that it seemed to divide the world of investors into two layers: those who try to multiply without protecting, and those who protect before multiplying. And it was by listening to these conversations that Sharkston began to grasp something even deeper, something that directly touched on how he himself thought about money. Those investors didn't analyze weeks, they analyzed cycles. While beginners want to know what will happen tomorrow, they want to understand what is forming for the next 5, 10, 15 years. They look at the market as if they were observing the movement of the tides, not as someone watching waves breaking. It's a different kind of rhythm, a different kind of perception, a different kind of patience. It's an understanding of the journey as something continuous and not as a sprint. And as Sharkston listened, something inside him began to reorganize itself. He realized that much of the anxiety at the beginning of the journey comes precisely from a lack of long-term vision. When you only see the next steps, everything seems urgent, everything seems decisive, everything seems like life or death. But when you observe entire cycles, complete crises, complete recoveries, the game changes. Turbulence ceases to be a threat and becomes an opportunity. The fall ceases to be fear and becomes a discount. And perhaps for the first time, he understood why experienced investors manage to remain calm while the market descends into chaos. They are not stuck in the present, they see the future. But something even more curious was happening there. Something Sharkston didn't expect. When these people talked about opportunities, they weren't talking about links, apps, or public options. They were talking about closed doors, private invitations, chances that only come when you've already proven you know how to take care of what you have. These opportunities, the so-called restricted rounds, minimum tickets, early participation, simply don't exist for those still in the initial stages. It's not discrimination, it's natural filtering. These are doors that only open when your own trajectory demonstrates that you are ready to enter. And it was at that point that everything made sense. The prize was never the money. The prize was always access. Access to the right conversations, the right people, the information that doesn't appear in Google searches. Access to the mindset that can't be taught, it's absorbed. Access to the kind of vision that only emerges when you stop surviving financially and start building solidly. From that moment on, Sharkston understood that true financial advancement doesn't happen when you accumulate wealth, but when you unlock new insights. And these insights change everything, from your decisions to your way of seeing the world. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's a detail in this universe that completely transforms any investor's trajectory when it's finally understood. It's one of those points that seems small but redefines the entire journey when it becomes clear. And it's here, exactly at this moment, that the Sharkston story begins to take on a new shape, revealing nuances that were hidden right before our eyes. Comment below. That makes sense to me. When Sharkston overheard those conversations and realized how naturally those investors approach decisions that, to many, would seem enormous, something inside him began to reorganize itself almost silently. It was as if an invisible piece had finally fallen into place. He had always believed that the big turning point happened when net worth reached $250K, as if that number were a magic key capable of opening any door. But observing that environment, the attitudes, the behaviors, the choices, the serenity, he finally realized he had been looking at the wrong thing all along. The number wasn't the key. The number was just the consequence. The real key was the kind of person you become before you reach it. This insight hit him like a gentle but profound shock. It wasn't about having $250,000. It was about being the kind of investor who could get there even if everything started from scratch. It was about consistency, about those daily decisions that seem too small to make a difference, but that slowly build a solid mindset. It was about financial maturity, that rare ability to not be carried away by impulse, to observe before acting, to know that the market shouldn't dictate your emotions. It was about patience, a strategic, conscious patience that understands that external pressure doesn't change internal results. And above all, it was about respect for wealth. Not respect as fear, but respect as responsibility. As someone who learns to value each step of the journey and not just the final destination. As Sharkston absorbed all of this, he almost felt the emotional weight of finally seeing the hidden truth that had always been there, but which most ignore because they are too busy chasing the perfect shortcut. The revelation was simple and, at the same time, transformative. Opportunities don't appear because you have more money. They appear because you have become someone capable of handling them. Maturity is the invisible filter, and this filter is relentless. It selects without warning, without making a sound, without asking permission. It chooses who is truly ready. And this explains so much that previously seemed unfair, distant, or inaccessible. Sharkston felt an unexpected tranquility. For the first time, the idea of getting there didn't seem reserved for a privileged few. It seemed accessible. It seemed human. It seemed real. Because at its core, it didn't depend on luck, nor on finding the perfect action, nor on stumbling upon a miraculous opportunity. It depended on walking with consistency, on building a mindset that could withstand losses, gains, uncertainties, and long phases without major emotions. It was this mindset that attracted bigger conversations, better mentors, and real opportunities. And understanding this, Sharkston saw that the path was clear. He realized that anyone willing to go through this process, this silent, patient, and often invisible process, could access that world too. That moment marked him because, for the first time, he saw himself as belonging to that place, not because of what he had, but because of who he was becoming. The transformation didn't happen on the outside. The transformation happened inside him. And with that inner change, everything around him began to make more sense. He understood that growing financially is a layered journey, and that each layer demands a different version of you. Some require courage, others require discipline, others require calm, but all require evolution. There is no financial advancement without emotional advancement. There is no solid wealth without solid maturity. There is no true access without true responsibility. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's a point in this story that connects everything. The kind of mindset that not only reaches new levels but remains there without getting lost in the excesses, illusions, and temptations along the way. It's a revelation that changes the direction of any investor's journey who decides to confront themselves honestly. And that's exactly where Sharkston's journey begins to take on even greater significance, opening up space to understand why so many doors remain closed to most, while a few begin to open for those who truly commit to evolving from within. Comment below. I'm on this journey, too. When that experienced investor approached Sharkston, there was no rush, no posing, no disguised arrogance that so often appears in the financial world. There was only a profound calm, almost as if he saw something in Sharkston that even he himself hadn't yet perceived. And when that man said, "You're not here because you have 250K. You're here because you've become someone who doesn't give up," the phrase resonated with Sharkston in a way he couldn't explain. It was as if the entire weight of the journey, every small step, every difficult decision, every silent doubt, had finally found a clear meaning. There, amidst so many technical conversations, long projections, and decisions that shaped the future, what truly mattered was the inner transformation that had brought him to that point. He realized in that instant that every investor who goes far carries invisible marks, marks that have nothing to do with charts or numbers, but with resilience, patience, and emotional courage. That experienced investor wasn't talking to Sharkston's net worth. He was talking to his character. He was talking about a hidden truth that few see. Who you become during the journey matters infinitely more than what you achieve at the end. And when Sharkston truly let that phrase sink in, something inside him opened up. It was almost as if the entire room rearranged itself around this new understanding. He looked around with different eyes. They weren't just investors. They were people who had been shaped by their own decisions, by the mistakes they had made, by the silent successes, by the falls that didn't make the news, and by the victories that no one saw happen. It was a group that had learned to walk even when the path seemed not to move. And Sharkston realized that belonging to that space had nothing to do with having reached the top, but with continuing to walk regardless of the obstacles. That changed everything. It changed his vision. It changed his internal rhythm. It changed the way he began to interpret his own future. Upon leaving that room, Sharkston didn't emerge bigger or more important. He emerged more aware. He left knowing that there's a profound difference between reaching a certain level and being prepared to remain there. Because getting there is difficult, but staying there requires a much more refined mindset. And that's exactly what began to pulsate within him. The need to continue evolving, not to impress anyone, but because the journey itself is worthwhile. It was as if that door had only shown him the first glimpse of what lies beyond. And the emotional impact of that was so strong that he walked through the corridors with a new, almost luminous clarity. He knew that within that framework lay revelations that went far beyond the financial. They were revelations about discipline, identity, maturity, purpose. Revelations about how the market tests you all the time, not through charts, but through your ability to not give up. Sharkston understood why so few reach that level. Not because they lack money, but because they lack the emotional strength to continue, even when it seems like nothing is working. That was the most powerful part of it all. He finally understood that someone's financial destiny is shaped less by numbers and more by the silent consistency that remains alive even behind the scenes. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's something about that specific moment, that instant, when someone recognizes you not for how much you have, but for how much you've become, that completely changes how you see your own journey. It's a turning point that redefines expectations, adjusts perspective, and separates those who only want to grow from those who are truly willing to face the process. And it's precisely in this emotional, almost invisible layer that the greatest transformation happens, leading Sharkston to an understanding that goes far beyond that room and begins to unfold within him like a new page being turned. Comment below, that makes sense to me. And if you've made it this far, it's because some part of this journey resonated with yours. Maybe it was a phrase from that experienced investor. Maybe it was the moment Sharkston realized that transformation comes before wealth. Or maybe it was just that feeling that you too are walking through your own door, in your own way, at your own pace. Whatever the reason, it already shows that you are part of this group that is truly building something consistent, not just numbers, but mindset, vision, and maturity. So, before I wrap up, I want to ask you something simple, but that makes all the difference. Leave a comment below so I know you stayed with me until the end. Right, I'm with you until the end. That's how I recognize who's walking alongside me, who's truly committed to this evolution that most don't even realize they need to make. And you can be sure, I read every single comment. If this content added something to your life, if it opened a window of opportunity, offered some insight, please leave a like. It's not about the metrics, it's because it shows YouTube that this type of conversation has value. And honestly, I think more people deserve to hear this kind of message. And of course, if you want to continue moving forward with me and Sharkston, if you want to be there for the next steps on this journey, subscribe to the channel here. This ensures you're around when we delve into even deeper and more revealing topics about this journey of building real wealth. Now, if you want to continue in the same vein as this video, there's some content over here that perfectly complements everything we've discussed today. Click there and continue reading.